can do whatever you want. Really.
There's one thing this video needs.
Yeah, but we never even done those things. Yeah, but we never even done those things. Yeah, but we never even done those things.
Rewind needs more science. Experiment.
Love that. Melting listeners. What's that?
Ella, what do you want?
Marshmallow needs to be in this.
Who is Marshmallow?
Let's see if I can challenge.
Right?
Wait, hold on. Everyone managed to do something bigger with themselves.
Everyone proves it's okay to put that I'm showing the viewers it's okay to go to.
It takes a lot of bravery to be that far. I'm so proud of you.
I think this year's Rewind should celebrate the fierce, fabulous, and empowering of drag. All of you are happy.
Yeah, I was so I was one night and my dad. What you wanted?
No, I'm
Quit forcing around. Look at that jumping. Say jumping? Jumping.
no, I want to ask for it.
Quit forcing around. Look at that jumping. Say jumping? Jumping. Well, we go. What happened?
Apparently, choice here. Y'all do whatever.
One thing this video needs.
Experiment?
Melting lipstick.
How's it chilling down?
Marshmallow. Let's be in my food challenge. Right? I'm going to give you five.
entertainment this year.
Give the people what they want. Give the people what they want. Let's give the people what they want. Wait, hold on. You know who really needs to be in this
Give a moment to Asian representation in entertainment this year. Major strides were made.
And to the people who took aside their differences.
Yeah, and created something really special.
Here's to all women in 2018 finding their voices.
Foi muito bacana ver como as mulheres cresceram esse ano, elas ganharam poder.
Can we give a moment to working moms? Ganbarimashou.
E a todo mundo que ensinou.
Ou que aprendeu alguma coisa nesse ano.
لكل اللاجئين لكل شخص عم يبحث عن وطن.
Todos nosotros deberíamos enviarle un saludo a... Get the solutions you need. Starting now. Rogers for Business. Let's move forward. And we need your help.
Hey! What is this one say again?
Please my parental copy.
There's one thing this video needs.
Y'all can't afford things like Lil Tay. I'm wearing the belt.
Yeah, but I control Rewind. I rewind Fortnite and Marquez Brown.
Is this what you wanted?
Fuck
you say to me? I have to be kind of a sociopath. Bitch.
Oh, that's hot. That's hot. You think this is a joke? You're eating up your breakfast when I'm eating up my dinner. Attention all listeners. Now, Ben Shapiro wants to know my location. Okay, that was epic. Next meme.
My body is very limited. My mind is free to explore the universe.
Have an idea that you genuinely think. Don't let some idiots give up. Special thing to my dear friend. Thanks so much.
Rewind time. Rewind time, everybody.
Oh, that's hot. Oh, that's
That is so awkward to watch.
YouTube Rewind 2018, the most disliked video in the history of YouTube.
Mr. Tiffany's and bottles of bubbles. But with tattoos, we like getting in trouble. Ashes and back, and machine. Put myself all on my favorite thing. And on some back, that should be a savage. Would God turn me to a savage? Rather return to calls and my strings. I'm on just like I remember the scene.
Independent Suites Aurelia, a unique lifestyle for seniors. A warm, friendly atmosphere with plenty of social activities and amenities like laundry services and fresh dining menus. All inclusive, all created with the seniors' independence in mind. Only a few suites available. Come tour Independent Suites Aurelia. Call 705-323-9000. That's 323-9000. IndependentSuites.ca.
Yeah. 2019. We made a top 10 Watch Mojo video. That will fix it.
Oh shit, let me go again. Here we go.
That's how Mafia works, bro. Women upset. Women upset. Women upset. Now you're at number one. Hope you did nothing wrong like starting your business by selling pirated songs.
Oh hey, I just about to go to bed. I know we couldn't Skype tonight, but that's alright. Good night, girl. I'll see you tomorrow. You have to know you fucking dick. Here we go.
That's the cutest fucking thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Bet you don't have this blue. Bet Bet you don't have this dream. Bet you don't have the biggest ball the world has seen. This a big girlfriend, lots of fun friends. I got bitches, that I'm on your farm. Yes, the handsome guy. Hey, Ninja, do you know Joe from Fortnite? I mean, that was one of the best questions I've ever been asked. Wow. You were supposed to ask me who Joe is. That's that. Marquez Brown. These cameras are the main focus for the iPhone 11 Pro. Oh, shit! A spot! I'm the bald guy. Bro. Excuse. Mean review. Who is this guy? Elon Musk. Does that want to be on a fence or something? I don't even know who this guy is. Wait, is that a real picture? What is that actually? Check this out. I'm Bodak! Stop again! Earwax! You got to kidding me! Let's go, champ! This is not right. This is not cool. This is fucking bullshit.
This is all wrong.
Today, we will be planting 20 million trees.
I'm trying to stick around. And I keep on.
Hello, Brian. Bill Edward Hack here with another PewDiePie update.
Fine job. Mixed up each other.
My message to you is to be strong no matter what you want. If you're homeless, you should help, seek help. Surround yourself with people who want to help.
Make sure that whatever life that you want, you strive for that shit. Make sure you go for that shit. Don't let anyone tell you it's not possible. Don't let anyone tell you that's not practical. The drive you need to get it, you pull that from yourself. You pull it.
We must stop the glorification of violence in our society. This includes the gruesome and grisly video games.
Steve. Oh, man. Okay, now you just cheated. Wow! Meow. I can't do this. Over on Twitter, you guys know this is the game of the year. Before we continue, you voted for amazing free-to-play MMO GTDP UFO. It has over 5 million downloads and is no more. Do you agree with our top 10 picks? Let us know in the comments below and check out all the creators in the video in the description. Anyway, do you agree with our top 10 picks? Let us know in the comments below and check out all the creators in this video in the description. Can't wait to see what you do next year, YouTube. Good luck!
So what happens if I get sick or injured and can't work?
Actually, you can protect your paycheck with disability insurance.
I wonder what they should do at this point. Like, what can YouTube do to have a successful rewind?
Well, sit down, Felix. Let's talk about that. Actually, you're already sitting down, so let's just move on, shall we? Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, where we always talk about everything 2 weeks after it's relevant because the show is so darn hard to produce. Seriously, no matter how many New Year's resolutions I make, in the last 8 years of doing this show, I've never been able to get, more than a week ahead. So today, I really want to talk about the YouTube. The last time that I talked about Rewind was back in 2015. Way back then, in that theory, I predicted that 2015's YouTube Rewind would be the final good one. And, okay, I wasn't that far off. I missed it by, a year, right? At this point, we all know the story. 2016's was good, not great. 2017 started massive decline. And then 2018, well, let's just cut to footage of 2018, shall we?
Oh, that's hot. That's hot.
Hot indeed, YouTube and TikTok sensation Will Smith. It was a literal garbage fire. And so this year, they just kind of gave up, threw up their hands and said, you know what, we don't know what you like. So here's a bunch of videos that objectively got a lot of likes instead. Minus, of course, the ones that didn't fit into the arbitrary rules that we listed out on our website. At this point, Rewind appears to have an unfixable problem. PewDiePie himself was called in to review this year's Rewind, and even he couldn't fix the darn thing.
I actually got to see it, and I got to give feedback on it, and they took some of my feedback, but it still bombed.
You were the chosen one. Honestly, there probably wasn't a whole lot that he was in a position to do, but still, the point is there. Overall, the reaction to the Watch Mojo list that was YouTube Rewind 2019 was, well, best described as not as negative as 2018, but outside of that, the creator community didn't have a whole lot to say about it. And I mean that literally. When reacting to it, that was just everyone's general response.
Oh, that's it?
That's it?
Oh, that's how they end it. Okay.
Okay.
It's like a bowl of rice. Not bad. It's a little plain. That's probably the greatest analogy I've ever heard.
And it's fine, I guess, but it's so boring. But you know what? I think that there's actually a lot to unpack from this year's Rewind that's largely gone ignored in favor of people arguing over whether there was either too much or too little K-pop in it. Because when you stop and analyze this year's Rewind, we get ourselves a preview of what the next 10 years of this platform will look like. Let me tell you, it's going to be a very different looking platform. First, let me get something personal off my chest. I recently posted a full interview I did with YouTube CEO Susan Wojcicki, where the very first question I asked her was about YouTube gamers being treated as second-class citizens. Her response was that we're not.
My answer would be no. I mean, gaming is an incredibly important part of our ecosystem. It's why I'm here. It's why we're having a gaming summit.
But then, less than a week after I post that video, I see this year's Rewind, which features lists of the year's top individual musicians, individual dance creators, individual beauty creators, and then this. Games. Not the gamers who play those games, create with those games, help those games grow and sustain popularity. The creators who are some of the platform's most well-known and successful personalities. No, it's a prime example of the problem that I leveled at Susan in that interview. Gamers as second class. You don't see beauty being boiled down to the list of the top palettes that we're talking about this year. We're not presented with the lists of the top music genres on the platform this year, but rather the top musicians. And yet gamers are only as good as the games that they play. Not even words being mentioned by name. And that's not being salty on my own behalf. Far from it. There is no chance that I would ever be mentioned on a list of top liked creators on the platform. Not that like. I just think that it's indicative of the way that this platform continually treats creators who communicate through the medium of games differently from those who communicate in other mediums, like blogs, or makeup, or music, and dance. Just, it's inequality. And you don't notice it unless you're looking for it. And it's there. It's sad. And I wish it would change. Because gamers are idiots. And we do a lot of this stuff. But okay, that was just a minor nitpick. Alright, now I want to talk about the big picture stuff, right? Let's start by attempting to fix the impossible problem that is the YouTube Rewind. And a big problem requires itself a big screen. So, if you'll excuse me, I gotta get off the couch for this one. We're headed to fancy Game my friend. That we don't know what to be like. That it's so hard to figure out. But the thing is, we managed to do it for 5 years before this fairly successfully, so it must be able to be done. And for all the talk around how big the platform has gotten and how many creators there are and how global it is and how impossible it is to satisfy everyone in a single video, honestly, I think that's just making a lot of excuses. That's not getting to the core problems that made 2017 and 2018 so dismal. When you look at those two rewinds relative to all the others, it becomes clear that Rewind's problems all boil down to two core issues. First one is dishonesty. The thing is, we first and foremost want YouTube Rewind to be what it promises it is, to be a rewind of the previous year. I'm sorry, but that's the brand that you've created, and now you're stuck with it. And believe me, I feel your pain. I do theories for a living. Theories are hard to write, especially one a week. But if I suddenly do something that isn't a well-researched, fully scripted out, thoughtful essay and call it a game theory, well, guess what? People get mad at me. And rightfully so, to be honest. Same with a rewind that doesn't actually rewind the events of the year. When multiple months feel I don't know, a worldwide movement supporting an independent creator racing across the 100 million subscriber mark before a large corporate channel, that's something that I think should probably come. When a massive battle between two rival beauty groups spills out as mainstream media sets records for unsubscribes in a day, spawning live stream counter trends that follow the drama, outright prompting you to change your platform, well, that's probably something. When a local that Wolf versus KSI boxing match is one of the biggest pay-per-view events on your platform, that's something that you're going to want to cover. Now, don't get me wrong. I know you want to put on a good face for your advocate, that you're ashamed of some of the more controversial or edgier stories on your platform. But YouTube was a platform that won the media wars by being first and foremost the source for authentic content. Authentic doesn't mean perfection. And if you really do want to do a rewind, like you say you do every year, you have to take the good with the bad. You have to honor both sides of this thing. Now, real talk, I understand why you'd be scared to slip into your edgier stories, but just because something might have negative connotations back when it happened, doesn't mean it still has to be negative when it appears in a YouTube rewind setting. Take the three examples that I just brought up, right? The Tati versus James Charles drama, T-Series versus PewDiePie, Logan Paul versus KSI boxing. Three huge stories that any yearly recap should absolutely include. Three stories that you might be sensitive to. I would assume that you were, since they didn't really appear in their respective yearly recap. But consider this. Instead of a giant boxing match, 3 rounds, each round immediately ripping on one of these respective battles. Or, you know what, if you don't like the boxing metaphor, use another YouTube trend example. Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast's YouTuber paintball challenge, with each duo were fighting at a certain point, now being recast as a team. Keeps things fun, lighthearted, and growth thematically, but also, and most importantly, not sweeping those events under the rug. Massive trends that happen on a global scale that everyone who lives and breathes YouTube expects to see here because it was such a massive cultural event for this platform. Because when you ignore stuff like that, that is when people get mad at you. That's when they hit the dislike button. That is when it starts to feel dishonest. Which is like the antithesis of why people love this in the first place. Second major problem, don't virtue signal or at least don't tell us that you're doing it well. It's a adage of showing, not telling. Early rewinds didn't have chaos circles of creators saying, oh, well, they are in the community. No. Instead, that message, that same message, was communicated in the imagery of the or wing backdrop, riffing on the Love Has No Labels viral video, featuring creators of different backgrounds without feeling the need to explicitly put it out. This is, and has always been, an inclusive platform of diversity, but calling it out as explicitly as you did in those last two rewinds is not only cringy, it's self-aggrandizing. It feels gross and self-serving. It takes a beautiful thing that happened organically on this platform and suddenly feels like it's being used to kind of creation on the back. So again, you say that you don't know what we like. Well, clearly audiences of YouTube like a pretty diverse selection of things. But I can tell you two things that we seem to universally not like: dishonesty and preaching. But you know what? This whole conversation, you know it, I know it, this time everyone at home watching knows it. Because I've read between the lines of your 2019 rewind. I see where your head's at, YouTube. I get that none of this matters, and that the rewind is now and forever gone, and it ain't coming back, you ain't interested in fixing it, so all these conversations are just moot points. But in order to fully have that conversation, I need to sit back down on the couch. The last year that YouTube attempted to put together a rewind that actually felt like a human made it rather than YouTube's own AI systems. Like, for all of YouTube attempted to put together moot points, but in order to fully have that conversation, you sit back down on the couch. The last year that YouTube attempted to put together a rewind that actually felt like a human made it rather than YouTube's own AI systems. Like, for all we know, an AI could have actually edited this thing together because goodness knows, and I'm watching. There's so many awkward jump cuts. Like, why would you put a cut there? You put the cuts on the beats and the music, guys. 2019's rewind had more glitch effects than a Five Nights at Freddy's theory. But aesthetics, why would you put a cut there? You put the cuts on the beats and the music, guys. 2019's rewind had more glitch effects than a Five Nights at Freddy's theory. But why would you put a cut there? You put the cuts on the beats and the music, guys. 2019's rewind had more glitch effects than a Five Nights at Freddy's theory. But aesthetics and the whole thing aside, what I actually mean by that is that this year, YouTube gave up pretending to be something that it's not. A person has a perspective. A person makes judgment calls about what's relevant, what's cool, and what isn't. This year, YouTube started doing what it does best: being a machine that can read numbers. You didn't like what you got last year? Fair enough. We'll stop deciding what we think you'll like and let the numbers choose for us. Beep boop, just like our algorithms. Over and over throughout 2019, YouTube has had to assert that it's nothing except a platform. A platform built. YouTube is no longer part of the YouTube community. It used to be. That was the heyday of the YouTube rewind. But it's not anymore. It's not a person. It's a platform. And this is just the latest in a whole slew of reactions that YouTube has had recently. Back in 2018, we experienced ad apocalypse. Advertisers complained about their ads running against content that they didn't deem as brand safe, and so YouTube was forced to react by changing ad policy. And along the way, their response to advertisers was, we're just a platform. People can post anything. We're just a machine, so you can't expect everything to be perfectly brand safe all the time. Fast forward to Article 13/17 when it was being passed around Europe. YouTube was again forced to react by working with countries to set up copyright policies, but along the way, they maintained what's called the safe harbor position. Basically a stance that says, hey, we're just a platform. We're not responsible for the content that gets uploaded here. If people upload copyrighted material, well, that's not really our problem. We should be held accountable. We're just a platform. Earlier this year, FTC came a knocking about COPPA, complaining that there was kids' content running ads on the platform. Again, YouTube was forced to react by changing kids' content policies, but also reacting to us in the creator community by not offering advice.
Nice. Okay, bye.
Numerically, what you told the platform that you like. Data in, data out. YouTube is the platform. They play by the numbers. They're not here to get involved with us. Say what you will about YouTube Rewind 2018. It was bad, it's cringy, it's preachy, it didn't represent the platform. But guess what it did do? It got air. It has 20 million likes and dislikes. Most of them dislikes and over 2 million comments. This year's, half that. 10 million. Only a million comments. Almost exactly half any way you slice it. The response was lukewarm at best. That's the problem with being neutral. You lose all that passion, that fervor, the excitement about what's going on. Lose the enthusiasm for being here as a part of the community. But the thing is, at least from where I'm sitting, the old rewinds are never coming back. YouTube still has a community, culture, right? We know this because if I say T-Series versus PewDiePie, pretty much everyone who watches this platform recognizes it, right? But YouTube itself is, from this point forward, opting out of its own community. Gotta say, feels kind of sad, right? Feels like a bit of a loss. Changing era. A tech company that is moving on from its birth. Which means that, I guess now it's up to us to pick up that torch and run with it. Creators like the ones that you see cycling through on screen right now. People who are working to create the real rewind. One that we feel really recaps the year in the way that we want to see it. Because we are still a part of this community. We still believe that there's a culture not shaped of it, and we're excited to be sad that YouTube doesn't feel the same thing. That's just a theory. A rewind theory. Thanks for watching. Whenever we see the news talking about video games these days, it seems like it's always the same thing.
In the 2 decades since Columbine, video games have been at the center of the controversy surrounding America.
A particularly violent video game.
And it has experts and some parents allowed.
This includes the gruesome and grisly video games that are now commonplace.
Then again, this type of alarm is nothing new. Roll that early 90s VHS tape.
You can knock your opponent's head off. Complete with electronic blood and guts. The game is called Mortal Kombat, one of the hottest video games going.
You never feel like going out and beating somebody up after watching this game? Tell me, Trey.
Yes.
The more things change, the more they stay the same, right? But to be fair, or counter arguments back in the early 90s were exactly the same too.
It's not hard.
So you know what? It's time to change the conversation. And that's my goal of today's episode. To move beyond this he said, she said style of argument that this topic's been mired in for decades. Instead, we need to get down to the real story. The scientific fact. Do video games actually make people more violent? Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, a show where we talk about a lot of things that absolutely do not matter, from the physics of Mario to the lore of haunted Chuck E. Cheese's. Yep, I know. Episodes of attention seriously, and it's especially hard if I'm talking about, I don't know, your favorite hero and then calling him evil time. But in truth, it's all for dumb fun. At the end of the day, whether or not Phoenix Wright is breaking the law in his pursuit for justice just doesn't matter. And by the way, that was a terrible episode. I am so sorry. Anyway, the long and short of it is that this show is meant to be entertaining first, with some education sprinkled throughout. I was lucky enough to have parents and teachers who were excited about learning, but so many others out there aren't so fortunate. So if I, this little web series here, get you interested in computer works by talking about Mario Maker, or teach us something about gravity and astronomy through the lens of Minecraft, well, that's great. You had fun, you'll learn a bit, and a slightly more positive place. But today, stupid, extraneous topics that we talk about on this show, today, what we're talking about does, in fact, is more relevant now than it's ever been. Do video games is there a connection between video games and the issue of gun violence in America? Since the 90s, various politicians have invoked video games as a major contributor to the mass shootings that are in the headlines over and over again. And now the president is even calling it out. So I wanted to do an episode on the topic so we can get a definitive answer to what's in it. See, that's the thing in this debate. You have two sides that are so entrenched in their respective answer that no one is bothering to actually stop and do the research. On one side, you have people who are so convinced that it must be the media we're consuming that's causing these aggressions that they're eager to point the blame there because they're biased against games. They don't understand. But on the other side, people grew up playing video games, where our knee-jerk reaction is like, no, duh, I play video games. I know a lot of people who play video games, and we're not violent. The problem with that, though, is it's not the truth. It's a small amount of anecdotal evidence. It's important to recognize that everyone's brains function differently. We're biased, too, in this debate, because we're eager to defend this thing that we love, that embodied our childhood. Neither side here is having a conversation because we're both so certain that we're right. What I want more than anything is what I hope all of us want, and that's the truth. If video games have no connection to real-world violence whatsoever, I want to have done my homework and have the receipts to prove it, and then be able to show those receipts to other people who claim otherwise. On the other hand, if I were to find causal evidence that said video games are making us more prone to violent impulses and making us less sensitized to violence, then I want us to hear that hard truth too. It'll suck, yeah, but it'll be important because we can start figuring out a solution. And that's not me trying to get political or anything. I don't care whether you're someone who believes strongly in gun ownership rights or the exact opposite. On the most basic level, I would hope that we're all united in the same goal of trying to find the source of blame and how to correct it so that fewer people get hurt and die. It's as simple as that. And if video games are to blame, then great! At least now we know that. And now we can start correcting it. At the end of the day, I don't want my son to grow up in a world where he feels like he has to be on guard for people trying to hurt him. At school, at church, at Walmart. So to be clear, my goal today is son to grow up in a world where he feels like he has to be on guard for people trying to hurt him. At school, at church, at Walmart. So to be clear, my goal today is not to propose any sort of political solution. I'm not qualified to do that at all. But instead to just share some cold hard thoughts. The scientific research done by trusted institutions presented to you in as unbiased a way as possible. The work that I've done for this episode has looked at the issue from three separate angles. Number one, examining links between video games and crime. Number two, looking at the profiles of many shooters and the role that video games played in their lives. And number three, exploring the psychology behind playing video games and how they affect our perspective of violence. Now, admittedly, or if you can't tell by this point, this isn't going to be my most lighthearted episode of Game Theory, but it certainly is one of our most important. Let's start with angle number one, shall we? Looking at any links between video games and crime. To start off with, we have to talk a little bit about the history of some of the more controversial and violent video games. You see, if there is indeed a direct causal link between violence shown in video games and users becoming more violent in their daily lives, then we would expect to see increases in violence spurred on by some of the most popular violent video games in history. And well, there are definitely some very early video games that had violent themes to them. If we want to talk about true graphic or realistic violence becoming popular in the mainstream, well, we'd probably have to look here. The early 90s and Mortal Kombat, which was released in 1992, as well as Wolfenstein 3D and Doom in 1992 and 1993. From that point forward, we've seen plenty of other violent video games get themselves bad press, like the Grand Theft Auto series, the Call of Duty series, Battlefield, things like that. But for the most part, the availability of violent video games has been pretty constant since the mid-90s. Now, Minrcraft, that you see right behind me, shows the growth of gaming, both in terms of pure number of games sold per year, as well as the number of titles released per year. And unsurprisingly, they both appear in the mid-90s, with platforms like the PlayStation and Nintendo 64 really surging to popularity, and then explode the
the 2000s as they really hit their peak, and it's all starting to taper off, coming back down here in 2010 as smart gaming have become more popular. But it's pretty clear that if the real surge in video games, which would include violent video games, occurred between the mid-90s and 2010, well, if we're forcing people to get more violence in real life, then crime experienced similar growth during those same periods. But when you look at the data, that's the opposite happening. The murder rate in the United States actually hits its peak in 1980. Pac-Man fever really setting people's minds into the rage mode. But starting in the 90s, those rates way down. From 1991 through 2016, homicides in the U.S. have actually gone down by 45.5%. And it's not just homicide that we're talking about here. We're talking about all major crime categories across the board. Assault, burglary, rape, all of them are down by at least 30% since 1991. The idea that the popularity of video games, which again, weren't really all that commonly played until about the 1990s, has contributed to making the United States a more violent society as a whole, just doesn't really show up in sorts of statistics. Now, maybe you think that since young people are the ones tending to play more video games, that youth crime statistics would actually show the real impact of violent video games on our minds. But those stats actually look pretty darn similar. The number of violent crimes committed by people ages 12 to 17 has plummeted since those early days in the 90s to a rate of about 1/5 of what it was at its peak. So the overall data seems to tell us that crime isn't getting worse, even though someone watching the news nowadays would think it's worse than ever. And that's probably less because crime as a whole is getting worse, and more because incidents of mass shootings have gotten bigger and more prominent and more shocking in the just exactly what constitutes a mass shooting creates a lot of disagreements. It is shockingly difficult to define as everyone comes up with their own definition to kind of forward whatever statistics they're looking to prove. But in general, I think a pretty common definition is that a mass shooting involves an incident where at least people are killed by a shooter in a public place. In that case, from 1982 until 2006, there were approximately 1.6 mass shootings per year. But in the years since 2006, and it's actually more than tripled to 5.4 per year. To put that statistic in another way, from 1949 until 1998, there were 9 mass shootings in the U.S. where at least 10 people were killed. So that winds up being about 1 every 5 years. In the last 20 years, meanwhile, there have been 18 shootings where at least 10 people were killed. That translates to 1 per year. 5 years per year. By the same token, though, while the murder rate has indeed gone down, the percentage of homicides committed using guns has been climbing steadily, hitting 73% in 2016. So maybe the question that we should be asking ourselves isn't whether video games make our society as a whole more violent, but whether they're causing select individuals from that society to suddenly snap and decide to become mass shooters. Like I said at the beginning of this episode, everyone's brains work totally differently. So while 99.9% of society might be completely unaffected by the violent video game, all it takes is just that one person to have a bad reaction to what they're playing. So the second angle that we need to take a look at this issue is what kind of role video games have played in the lives of past mass shooters. Perhaps most famously, the 2 Columbine shooters from 1999. They were fans of early first-person shooter too. The Sandy Hook Elementary shooter for a lot of video games, as it was games like Left 4 Dead, Grand Theft Auto, and there was a Norwegian shooter, which I know we're focused on U.S. shooters, but I needed to get it reasonably researched. Back in 2011, he claimed that playing Call of Duty actually helps his aim and target acquisition, both skills that he used during his attack. Now, to be sure, some mass shooters are fans of video games, but you can't take just these few examples and create a causal connection. Especially since I could list plenty of other tragedies where those shooters didn't have strong ties to video games. In fact, of the 18 incidents that I mentioned earlier that had more than 10 deaths, my research actually tells me that only 4 of those shooters actually had noteworthy There are plenty of explanations for that, but it all aligns with a report issued by the Secret Service back in 2002, which indicated that only 12% of school shooters express any sort of interest in violent video games. Now, you could probably make a case for an interest in video games being a statistical coincidence, given that most mass shootings are actually committed by young men, and 72% of men under the age of 30 play video games. 58% of men from 30 to 49 play video games as well. It's just not that surprising that young men who do evil things also happen to share habits with other young men who don't do evil things. Other young men in their same demographic. Other traits that these shooters share: breathing oxygen, eating food, wearing clothes. But to call that out seems ridiculous, right? I don't see anyone attacking the denim industry because these shooters tended to wear jeans. It appears as though opponents to video games are mixing correlation with causing. Now, as for that Norwegian terrorist's claim that shooting games made him much more effective, those claims may have had some ground to stand on if they wouldn't have gotten redacted over the years. You see, a study was published in 2014 that found people who practiced shooting games got more headshots in real-world target practices by a wide margin, but that study was retracted because the results couldn't be replicated by outside researchers or the original researchers who conducted the experiment in the first place. Regardless, there's still one more piece of evidence that makes me think that video games aren't the variable to blame for our epidemic of gun violence here. The United States isn't unique in its consumption of video games. Compared to other nations with big gaming cultures, though, we are unique in how much gun violence we have. The numbers absolutely back this up. Well, U.S. is number one in money spent on video games per year. The rest of the top 10, China, Japan, South Korea, Germany, Canada, Spain, and Italy.
You have a 7-8 class.
China doesn't release statistics
Yeah.
on gun violence.
Do you like that?
The rest
Eh.
of them do.
Did you make new friends in grade 8?
I don't really care, no.
Why? Because you might see those kids in high school.
Same people. Pretty much same people.
You know, some people move away.
Pretty much. Pretty much. Otherwise, they're in the other place.
Countries aren't immune to mass shootings, but it's awfully hard to believe that our consumption of video games is to blame for the gun violence in America. In other nations where those same games are popular, don't have anywhere near that same problem. But still, I am willing to consider the possibility that violent video games could be harmful, especially since the
We'll do the
American...
stand-up procedure first. Here, stand up.
Can I lay down?
No, because I need you to stay. Stand up. I can't do it without you standing up. Stand up.
I'm dying.
Here, stand up.
Need for a rest.
Hey. It's very squishy. Stand up. Please.
You can stand up.
It's perfect.
You stand up.
Fuck, it's too short. Ah, shit. 2. Perfect.
So I'm good like this?
No. It eliminates 1 out of 3. Perfect. I'm gonna double check. Is this too short? Fuck it. It's too short. It's a little Kobe. Well, is it really? Is this where you put your pants, Edward? This and here?
Yeah.
Here, stand up then. Stand up. I can't tell.
Please put on.
Yes. Let's do it. Oh my god, I farted. Okay, get up, please. Before I can take off the price tag. There, stand up, please. Don't put it on the bed. Come on.
Why not?
I haven't washed these clothes. Okay, stand up and try it on. Go. Quickly. On and then off. Is it too tight?
No,
stand up. Okay, stand up so I can look.
Yeah.
Okay, next. Okay, grab under your underwear. Okay, next. Because I have to also, hey, take it up. And 2. Okay, second one. Here's second one here. Stand up. Spent a lot of time trying to find your pants, by the way. Hey, get up.
I spent a long time.
Here. Go. Other one. Other one. Okay, pull them up, please. Go. Or I hurt your tenders. Come on, stand up.
So
stand up.
My brain just stops.
Stand up. Stand up.
Yeah.
Okay, this works fine. Okay, next. Okay, this one, last one, last one.
I'm stuck. Oh.
Okay, let's see. Okay, this one. Here. This one, come on. You're lucky I don't have to drag you to the store. One day I really have to drag you to the store. Bugger.
I'm dying.
Next one. Next one.
I'm literally
Go. Go. Okay, drag it up. Drag it up. Hey, pull it up. Pull it up. Come on. Does it work? Yes. Hey, stand up. Stand up. Stand up, Edward.
I'm so
Oh,
tired.
fuck, they're short. Okay, here.
Let me
Okay,
rest.
this one goes. Okay,
Let me
go.
rest. Let
Up.
me rest.
Okay.
Let me rest.
Okay, you're done. Yay!
Hey!
That's not even mentioning the conflicting studies that contradict all the ones that I just mentioned, or the psychologists who write entire articles and papers talking about how overblown the idea of video games causing violent, aggressive behaviors might be. It gets confusing trying to figure out what findings are most valid, which researchers might have conflicts of interest, which ones are just putting out weak findings because they have to get published to keep their jobs. But for me, one of the most telling analyses of the state of psychological research on this topic, violence in video games, actually comes from an unexpected source. The Supreme Court, of all places. In a 2011 case titled Brown versus the Entertainment Merchants Association, the Supreme Court ruled that a California law forbidding the sale of certain video games to kids was unconstitutional. And they struck down that law with a vote of 7-2. Part of the majority opinion written by the court stated this, quote, psychological studies purport to show a connection between exposure to violent video games and harmful effects on children do not prove that such exposure causes minors to be aggressive. Any demonstrated effects are both small and indistinguishable from effects produced by other media. End quote. What's really encouraging about that message right here is that that majority opinion was written by Justice Antonin Scalia, one of the most conservative members of the court, but it was co-signed by one of the most liberal justices, Bader Ginsburg and Sonia Sotomayor. What I mean to say this is that when you're looking at gun violence, it doesn't have to be a partisan issue. Sure, Supreme Court justices aren't supposed to be a part of any political party, but with how divisive discussions on gun violence get, it's important to remember that looking at research and deciding what is and isn't supported by sound scientific data isn't a matter of politics. It's a matter of caring about the truth above and beyond everything else. That's one of my takeaways from researching this episode. The need for us to be able to put politics aside when we're looking at these sorts of problems. There's a reason why I haven't done this video in the last 8 years of making games